Welcome to another deep dive, and this time we're going to be taking a look at aestheticism.
Ooh, interesting.
It's this movement, right, that kind
Right.
of just went against all those stuffy Victorian norms.
Right.
So I've got a whole bunch of articles here and some notes I've jotted down.
Wow, you come prepared.
Well, got to do my homework, right?
Absolutely.
So today's mission, if you want to call it that,
I do.
is to figure out how did this obsession with beauty back in the 1800s still kind of echo in our world today?
I love it.
Like, think about it this way. Have you ever, looked at a painting and just, it makes you happy? You're not really sure why.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not about like the meaning or the story behind it. It just, well, it's beautiful and it just makes you feel good.
Yeah,
That's like the core of this whole art for art's sake thing,
definitely.
which is like aestheticism in a nutshell.
That's perfect. I think people can really grab onto that. So, to really dig into this, it's important to understand when this all came about. It was during the peak of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So like mid-1800s Victorian era, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a society that was like obsessed with being practical.
Hmm.
Everything had to have a use, a purpose, utilitarianism.
Yeah. Like no time for frills.
Exactly. And that's where aestheticism swoops in. It was a breath of fresh air. It was like this rebellion against all that seriousness.
I like that.
It was a way to say, hey, we're allowed to enjoy things. We can celebrate beauty, just because it feels good.
And that's what really struck me when I was going through all the stuff I've been reading.
Mm-hmm.
It's like overflowing with these really lush descriptions, a deep appreciation for anything that's beautiful.
That makes sense. They were all about using their senses, experiencing the world in a very intense, vivid way. It wasn't just about thinking, it was about feeling.
Absolutely. Like wake up all your senses, not just your mind.
Precisely.
I love it.
And for them, beauty wasn't just like a nice extra. They
Oh.
truly believed it had like real value in and of itself.
Okay.
It actually goes back to this ancient Greek idea of kaloskaya gathos, beautiful and good.
Interesting.
Like these things were intertwined for them.
Hmm.
And a lot of this thinking came from, big thinkers like Immanuel Kant,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
who said that beauty's important,
Yeah.
whether it's practical or teaches you a lesson or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Just beauty in itself.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget Walter Pater.
Oh, right.
His writing basically became like the Aestheticism Manifesto.
Ah, Walter Pater, the art for art's sake guy.
Yes, that phrase just captures it perfectly, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's this idea that art doesn't need to like have some grand purpose.
right.
It can just exist because it's beautiful. Pretty radical, especially in the Victorian era where everything had to have a moral lesson.
Oh, for sure. It makes you think about like how we do things today, though, right?
Oh, how so?
Like everyone's always curating their Instagram feeds,
Yeah. Yeah.
making sure their apartment looks just right.
Yeah.
It's all about aesthetics.
Absolutely. Making things pleasing to the eye, even if it doesn't like serve a practical function.
It really makes you wonder, like, were these aesthetes actually way ahead of their time?
It's a good question.
Maybe they were, yeah. But let's talk about some of the people who actually like brought this whole aestheticism thing to life.
Oh, yes.
Because these weren't just, writers and artists. They were like larger than life characters
Totally.
who really embodied these ideals. Where should we even start?
Well, we have to start with the ultimate dandy himself, Oscar Wilde.
Of course.
He was aestheticism personified,
Oh, totally.
not just in how he dressed and acted, but also in his writing. So witty and thought-provoking.
Oh, absolutely. And the picture of Dorian Gray, right?
Yes,
That's like a classic example of aestheticism.
definitely. Exploring beauty, pleasure, and what happens when you like dedicate your whole life to those things.
And his epigrams, too.
Oh, I love those.
Those little like zingers that just sum up the whole aesthetic mindset, right? Like, yeah, we're serious about beauty, but we're going to have some fun with it too.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just Wilde pushing the envelope, right?
Oh, absolutely not. We've got Algernon Charles Swinburne.
Oh, yes.
His poetry was just as daring, especially for Victorian England.
I can only imagine.
He explored sensuality, questioned morals, stuff that would made people blush back then.
Oh, wow.
He was all about celebrating the human body, tackling subjects that were totally taboo.
Yeah.
His work, like Wilde's, was a huge break from all that restrained, preachy literature that was so common in the Victorian era.
And then there's Dante Gabriel Rossetti. a
yes.
painter, but also a poet who was part of that, the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood.
Right.
That group of artists trying to bring back that early Renaissance beauty and simplicity.
Yes. And his paintings are just visually stunning, often featuring women with this like otherworldly beauty. Rossetti's art really captures that aesthetic fascination with sensual and sublime beauty.
Mhm.
He wasn't interested in painting reality as it was. He wanted to create these idealized visions of beauty, taking inspiration from mythology, literature, his own imagination.
It's like he was building a world where beauty was everything, where like every little detail, every brushstroke had meaning, had sensuality.
Exactly.
And speaking of creating worlds, we can't forget James McNeill Whistler,
Oh, Whistler.
the American painter known for his dreamy nocturnes.
Those are incredible. And what's interesting about his work is it shows a shift to a more abstract, mood-focused way of painting.
Mm.
You know, his famous Nocturne in black and gold, the one with the falling rocket,
Yeah.
that caused quite a stir because it put the focus on the colors and the light more than having a clear subject.
Oh, interesting.
It was a radical departure from what people expected paintings to be.
It's almost like he was trying to like paint music, right?
Yeah. Yes.
To capture a feeling or an atmosphere more than just a specific scene.
Exactly.
His work feels so modern, especially considering, the Victorian art world around him.
Absolutely. It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is. We've covered so much already.
Yeah.
It's incredible how all these different artists, each in their own way, they all embody that spirit of aestheticism.
You really do. And what's even more remarkable is their influence is still felt today. Think about the decadent movement that came after.
Right, right.
They took that focus on beauty and pleasure even further. And the ideas that the aesthetes explored, they've really laid the groundwork for modernism, which totally changed art and literature in the early 1900s.
It's like they planted a seed that kept growing and evolving, influencing so many artists that came after them and shaping how we think about art and beauty today.
That's a great way to put it.
But I'm curious, beyond these individual figures, are there any like big themes that connect all their work together?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Like what's the common thread that runs through all this art and all these ideas?
I'm happy to explore that with you. Well, one of the biggest things that jumps out is this real commitment to beauty and sensuality.
Right, right.
You think of like Wilde's writing, so clever, so playful.
Yeah.
Swinburne's poetry, so evocative, so full of feeling. Or even Rossetti's paintings, so detailed and rich.
Yeah.
They're all about appealing to our senses, making us really experience the beauty around us. But it's not just about passively appreciating it.
Oh, okay.
It's about actively seeking out those experiences that really, set your senses on fire.
I see, I see. Yeah, the sources I was looking at, they mentioned this idea that like pleasure's temporary, right? That
Right.
beauty fades.
Yeah.
So you got to savor it, enjoy it while it lasts.
Exactly. And that awareness that nothing lasts forever, it adds this, bittersweet layer to their work. They weren't saying go wild and be reckless.
Right.
But they're saying be really aware of the beauty in this moment because it won't be here forever.
I like that.
And that kind of naturally leads to the whole celebrating hedonism and individualism thing.
Right. Which kind of clashes with all those Victorian ideals.
Totally. I mean, on the one hand, they're all about enjoying sensory experiences.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're challenging all those rigid moral codes of the time.
Right, right.
Their art often puts personal pleasure and expression above, tradition and what society expects. And, that definitely ruffled some feathers back then.
Oh, I bet it did. They were totally shaking things up.
No, absolutely. They were seen as rebels, hedonists. Some even saw them as a threat to the whole social order.
Wow.
But their defiance, it wasn't about just tearing everything down, It was more about creating a space for beauty, for individual experience in a society that often felt very stifling.
That's interesting.
So it's not like they were just against all rules and structure,
Nice.
They were more about finding a place where beauty and personal experience could thrive, even if it didn't fit the mold.
That's a really good point. Because it wasn't all just about indulging, right?
No.
Their work was often incredibly refined and sophisticated.
Absolutely.
Think of like a Rossetti painting with all those intricate details.
Yeah.
Or a Wilde play so carefully crafted. There's a dedication to beauty, to artistry that goes way beyond just, seeking pleasure.
Exactly. And that actually leads us to another really cool thing about aestheticism.
What's that?
They rejected this idea of art having to be moralistic.
Oh, right. Because a lot of Victorian literature at the time, it was very, like, preachy.
Totally. It was all about teaching lessons and
You know,
reinforcing values.
is how you should behave and all that.
Exactly. But the aesthetes, they were like, hold on. What if art's purpose is just to be beautiful, to make you feel something, regardless of any moral message?
Interesting. Just like pure experience.
Yeah, exactly. And that was revolutionary. By stepping away from all that preaching, they opened up this space to explore human experience in a much more nuanced way.
I see, I see.
And, that paved the way for things like the decadent movement, which took that focus on beauty and pleasure even further, and later, modernism, which completely shook up the art world in the early 20th century.
Wow, so they really were influential.
Hugely. It's like they were setting the stage for a more individual, subjective way of looking at art, a way that still influences us today.
That's fascinating. But it makes me wonder, if beauty was so important to them, how did they even define it?
Oh, that's a great question.
Was there like a specific style or rules they followed?
Well, the answer, like a lot of things about aestheticism, it's complicated.
Okay.
There are some recurring themes and styles for sure, like the focus on sensory detail, that craftsmanship we were talking about.
Yeah.
But their definition of beauty, it wasn't fixed or absolute. It was subjective, always changing, kind of like beauty itself, really.
Mhm. So not so much about following a set of rules then.
Right.
More about being open to beauty in all its different forms.
Exactly.
It makes me think of some of those design trends today, like minimalism, where it's all about simplicity and function,
Yeah.
or even the slow food movement.
Ah,
That emphasis on like fresh ingredients, traditional preparation.
it's all about finding the beauty in those things.
Exactly.
And just like those movements, the aesthetes believed that beauty could be found in the most unexpected places.
Right.
They weren't just focused on grand pronouncements about art. They were also interested in the everyday, in those fleeting moments of beauty that we often miss in our busy lives.
That reminds me of another thing I was reading about. This
Oh,
whole idea that like the temporary nature of experience, that was key to their philosophy.
right.
It's like they were saying, savor this moment, this feeling, this experience, because it won't be here forever.
Yes. There's a real sense of urgency in their work, a desire to capture the beauty of the present moment before it slips away.
It's almost like those mindfulness practices people do today,
Oh, interesting connection.
where the goal is to like be present and really appreciate the beauty of right now.
You're right, there's a definite parallel there. The aesthetes, much like mindfulness practitioners today, recognize the power of being present. That awareness that beauty fades, it makes their appreciation of it even deeper, even more urgent.
It's not about holding on to things then.
No.
It's
Yeah.
about experiencing them fully, knowing that their impermanence is part of what makes them beautiful.
Beautifully put. It reminds me of something Walter Pater wrote. He said, to burn always with this hard gem-like flame, to maintain this ecstasy is success in life.
Wow.
It's like he's telling us to really live, to embrace every experience, every sensation, and to find beauty in the fact that nothing lasts forever.
That's powerful.
It really is. And that philosophy, that embrace of the moment, that pursuit of ecstasy in the face of life's impermanence, that's one of the most lasting legacies of aestheticism. They weren't saying we should ignore the challenges of life,
Right.
They were saying be open to beauty, search for it, even in its most fleeting forms.
I like that. So we've gone through the philosophy, right?
Yeah.
We've met some of those really interesting figures.
Right. Larger than life.
And we've even touched on how aestheticism like impacted society and culture back then.
Absolutely. But now I think it's time to bring it back to you,
Ooh, yes. To our listeners.
to the listener.
Yeah.
What about aestheticism speaks to you?
What resonates?
Yeah, what parts of it do you see in your own life? Because that's what makes exploring these ideas so fascinating, right?
Okay.
They change and evolve when we view them through our own individual experiences.
Absolutely. Like so much of what we've talked about, like beauty, pleasure, living in the moment.
Right.
That's all so personal. It depends on who you are, what you value, how you see the world.
Exactly. And it brings us to a really important question.
Okay.
How do you define beauty?
Ooh.
And where do you see the influence of aestheticism in your own life? Maybe it's subtle, maybe it's not.
Yeah. It could be in the way you arrange your books on your shelf.
Yes.
Or the music that just like moves you.
Totally.
Or a painting that speaks to you on a deeper level.
Exactly. Or maybe it's how you present yourself online.
Huh.
Or that feeling of satisfaction you get when you see a beautifully crafted object.
Ooh, yeah.
Or the pure joy you feel when you're out in nature and you just witness a perfect moment.
Right. Or even like those little things,
Right,
right?
that's
Like taking a moment to smell your coffee.
Yes.
Or noticing how the light shines through the trees. The point is, aestheticism, it's not just some dusty old concept. It's not locked away in museums and history books.
Right. It's a living, breathing philosophy.
Yeah.
And it encourages us to find beauty all around us in the everyday, to chase those experiences that truly make us feel alive.
And remember, those aesthetes, they weren't afraid to challenge the rules, to push boundaries. So don't be afraid to embrace your own unique definition of beauty, even if it's different, even if it goes against the grain.
Exactly. The world needs more people who are willing to stand up for beauty in all its forms, who find joy in the unexpected. That's the true legacy of aestheticism, I think. Not a set of strict rules, but a sense of exploration, a dedication to experiencing beauty fully.
Beautifully said. So go out there and be an aesthete in your own way. Find art that challenges you, that inspires you. Surround yourself with beauty that speaks to your heart. And never stop looking for those things that spark your senses, that make your soul sing.
And on that journey, keep Walter Pater's words in mind. To burn always with this hard gem-like flame to maintain this ecstasy is success in life.
What a thought. What a beautiful thought to end on. This deep dive into aestheticism has been a real treat.
It has.
And I hope it's inspired you to see beauty in a whole new light.
Me too.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing the beauty that's all around you.
Absolutely.